from nursery school through higher education, the basis of the programming is really to focus on what you don't know. That's why we do assessments, that's why we do exams. It's really about what don't you know and can you learn it. So for those then who are out of their comfort zone, then it actually becomes a stumbling block to them because our focus is so much on what I don't know. And if you go through that system and you don't quite tick the boxes the way society wants to tick them, you don't make the grade, you come out feeling inadequate. And so then you see that same mentality carrying on when we start talking about entrepreneurship, and this is where a lot of people sit on the great ideas that they have. A lot of it is to do with the way we have been programmed. We talked with Chris about how we can really push the vision forward of African Business Platform, and it's an evolving vision, as you can see from what Chris has been talking about. And if you've been here from the very first sessions, you can see how the vision is evolving. And really what we're trying to dial into now is really focusing on the people who are here. What are the people's needs? If you know the term WIFID, and would know the term WIFID. Yeah?
Yeah.
What's in it for me?
What's in it for you?
Yeah? So as an entrepreneur, you always have to be thinking, when you think about your business and your idea, put yourself in the customer's shoes and says, what's the customer's WIFID? What is in it for me? So same way when we come this morning, I was thinking it's very difficult to prepare something to, you have to resort back to this and say, okay, what do the people need and want? So we're going to try to mix this session up, and I'm going to act more of a coordinator of this session, because it's not just about the presenter, but I believe you can use the session to tap into everybody's experience here, because we're all coming from different angles. So certain bits are relevant for you, certain bits are not, because everybody's at a different place in their business and entrepreneurial journey. So perhaps first of all, normally you probably ask questions at the end of a presentation, but we'll mix it up a bit, and I like to ask the questions at the beginning and say, what are people's pending issues, what are the challenges that we're facing? And it's not that it's me, the presenter, who has the answer, but there's other people here who are probably faced that issue before, and the solutions are here. So I don't know what stage everybody's at in their business. So I'll just throw the question out there. Where are we at? What is the biggest challenge that you're facing right now in terms of taking your idea forward? Because the thing for today is you and your idea. Anybody? Any questions? Any stumbling blocks that you're facing at the moment for you and your idea?
I think yeah, and for me it will have to be, I've got this, obviously coming from the skills that I've got. I work as a teacher of English as a foreign language. I've been there for the last 7 years. I'm currently working as a trainer for Kirby University Hospital. And one of the key things that I've been really interested in is actually using these skills that I've been able to get over the years as a result of the job that I've done, to actually package it into something that I can actually then go and maybe be a trainer or set up a training business. I also have this idea to start writing books as well, publishing, so it's about publishing and training. So for me at this point, the idea is still lingering in my mind. It's just a case of actually translating it down into where do I start,
right?
How do I go about it,
right?
And getting to that point where, because he was talking about a lot of niches in Africa, and I think that one of the key things is in the area of education, whether it be in entrepreneurial education, for example, going there and encouraging people to say, hey, you can do it. You don't have to think of, I mean, when I was, just to give you a little bit of background, when I was back home in Ghana, when I was at the university, all we ever thought of is actually coming abroad. that is what we thought of. And once you finish university, you got a degree, you come over. It wasn't until you come over that you come to realize that it's a totally different ballgame altogether, because people come in with a lot of lofty ideas, but then, you know, due to one reason or the other, they find themselves drifting apart. And I want to be able to package this into some kind of training business where not just focusing really in Africa, but also the world in general, going to places, training people, encouraging people, getting them to get to that place where, you know, they can start doing something for themselves. So for me, that is where I am at the moment. It's just a case of actually packaging and saying, okay, what can I do? How can I get out there and start, you know, marketing myself and saying that this is what I'm doing and all that. So that's where I am at the moment.
I think the first thing to say is that I don't have to be psychic or a prophet to say that you've had this idea for years. These ideas for years.
Like every one of us.
And it's not different from every one of us. Okay. So the question then becomes, what's the likelihood that in after a year, I'll probably be telling you the same story? What's the likelihood? And I'll tell you it's very high. Okay. So the first thing, one of the points I had just before I come on to that, the first thing is that is your idea a business or a fantasy? That's first and foremost. Okay? So, how do we distinguish the two between a business and a fantasy? Priscilla, what separates business and fantasy? The numbers, yes. The numbers differentiate whether you have a business or a fantasy. So you're talking about training, for example, and this is applicable to any business idea, because we're talking about you and your idea. The first thing is this idea a business or a fantasy? So you need to let the numbers decide that.
When you say numbers, what do you mean exactly?
Right. So when we talk about the numbers, and I encourage you to come on Ken's course because he goes a lot deeper on some of these issues. So I'm just trying to give you an overview today. The numbers can this actually become a business? Okay. Is there a market for it? Is there people that are going to spend money? Am I going to bring value to the marketplace? Okay. So otherwise we can become so emotionally attached to our idea because we so want it to work, we ignore the numbers. Okay. Now, when it comes to the numbers also, you also have to be mindful that business has a lot to do with not only your psyche but your culture as well. Why is it that most of manufacturing comes out of China, for example? Why is it that most of financial services, research, etc. comes from the UK? A lot of it is cultural, environmental as well. Okay, so you have to be mindful that, for example, in African culture, we don't focus too much on the numbers. Right? In African culture, that's very important because it's very important when you, as an entrepreneur, you need to know yourself. Because knowing yourself will help you overcome your stumbling blocks, will help you overcome the years of it just remaining an idea in your head. So, at best of time as Africans, we don't focus on the minute details or the numbers of a particular business. Why? Because we come from a continent that is rich and abundant. We've never had to. Right? You look at the way houses are built in the UK. We have terraced housing. Why? Land resources are limited. So the numbers in a culture like the UK, like the West, is very, very important because resources are not abundant. Space is not abundant. So the numbers become very, very important. So it becomes inbuilt in the culture because of the environment, right, that you're in. So that permeates then into the way the West would do business. Right? We're not saying one thing is better than the other. It's about understanding what the status is and then using that information to then become successful in your business.
I hate to be the black sheep, but I don't actually agree with you at some point. Because I feel that businesses are very different. From what he's saying, because I do have experience in the area of what he's saying. I used to be an accommodation manager for 2 language schools in Cambridge. So I do know where the market is, and I think, like with setting up any business, it's about connecting with the people who have the same vision as you, who have experience of that vision, and maybe people who have done it, who could hold you by the hand and say, this is where you need to go. When I set up my own foundation this week, the first person I contacted was Ken, and I contacted him just after midnight, I think it was, by WhatsApp.
You didn't necessarily got a response.
Yeah, I didn't get a response. But you know, all that came to my head was, I need these structures in place. I don't know how to do it myself. There's this guy that's been doing it for 30 years. He's got to know a bit of something. So I think that for him, because my sister is also a teacher of English, and she actually hired out the Central Library to get started, to have a group of 10 people paying X amount an hour to teach them English. So I think that my contribution to this is, if that's your dream, if that's what you want to do, you might want to do an attachment with a language school. There's the Regent School on Mill Road, and there's one on Brooklands Avenue. You might want to render your services for free to come and do an attachment with them for a week. I certainly was the accommodation manager, and I think they used to have about 40, 50 students come by coach every weekend, and we used to have 2, 3 coaches. None of them spoke English, and I certainly didn't speak Chinese. So, you know, you'd call out their name because you weren't pronouncing it correctly, and they're staring at you and they're not answering because you're not pronouncing their names correctly. And then they'll say something like, but my English name is Stone. Why don't you just call me? So, you know, you know what I'm saying when it comes to it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And all those obstacles you have to overcome. So what I would say is, that business, for instance, like I do property for a living, physical bricks, you know what I mean? People pay before they enter. I don't have to chase anybody for money. That kind of thing. So that's a different kind of business.
Yeah.
You know, and again, your business, I think, is about connecting with people who are already in that industry. Maybe schools in Cambridge, because the one on Brooklands Avenue, I know the director, and she's Chinese, and she went to China, to the schools, to recruit them to send people here in the holiday, in the 6 weeks holiday. They come and learn English for 6 weeks, and all the transportation and all that and all the coordination is done by her and the other managers that she hired. And she hired me only for 6 weeks for accommodation, because that's what I do. So it's about linking with the right people, going to other people to get experience who are already doing it. It might sound a bit weird to go to an English school that's already running and talk to a principal and say, I have a similar thing, could you help me? You know, what do I need to do? And they're quite open and willing. As long as you don't tell them you're going to put it on Brooklands Avenue next door.
No. That's really good. But for now, I'm just going to break away from teaching English. That's not the whole idea I wanted to do.
Okay.
I did that as a way of getting the experience and everything.
Yes.
I've done that for the last 6, 7 years.
Yes.
But I want to break away from actually teaching English. I want to be doing training.
Yes.
And that is totally different from
It's very
doing English
different,
language. Exactly.
yeah.
So that's
So
where
just to chip in with that question.
I could,
Yeah.
I
I
think
could go back to
what I think from that question of
Yeah.
knowing the numbers is
Yeah.
quite right in every business,
Yes.
because numbers
Yes.
is going to determine if the business is going to be successful or not.
Yes.
So, though network is important to have to tap into experience
Yes.
of different people and
Yes,
skills
yes,
that you
yes.
might not have. Like I was
Yes.
saying,
That you need to move before.
exactly, which is like you mentioned. But for number that what she said is quite important. Why do you want to do that business? It's important. How many people do need those services? How many people are you going to impact? If the numbers stacked up, then it's going to be a successful business. I think that is what he's trying to say.
Yeah.
Thanks for the contributions, and this is why we said that 10 minds is better than one. So Anita, I don't know why she said she didn't agree, but she's saying everything exactly as...
Exactly.
she's actually...
Just want to say I'm taking a long time to fulfill. Maybe I should have quantified.
Yeah.
I don't think it'll take him a long time to fulfill that vision if he goes and gets help.
So Anita is agreeing with me 100%. In actual fact, she just says it in better, eloquent English. But Anita's 100% spot on. What she was doing by contacting Ken is really, is this a fantasy or a business?
Yeah.
How are you going to find that out? Find out from people who are already doing it. Find out from people who are already in the industry. That's essentially what Anita is saying,
Yeah.
right? So again, it's the numbers. Because when you bounce off people who are already in it, because there's nothing new under the sun.
No.
It comes in different shapes and forms, but in essence, the essence of it is nothing new, right? So that's the first thing one would have to decide. Is this a fantasy or a business? So and the numbers will tell you that by doing the research with people who are more experienced, etc., etc.
When you say again, when you say numbers, is it about, for example, if you Google a word, you would often have 150 million
It's probably
searches and all that. Is it really what that's about? Is it about, okay, I want to set up a publishing and training business. How many people, if I put up a training about, for example, starting a business or whatever that is, how many people are likely to come to that?
Yes.
Is that what?
So two things. Is there profit?
Okay.
And two, how much of it? Simple as.
And I think that's a very important point. It was great to hear that the guy from South Africa is coming here in July, because South Africa has one of the highest levels of failure rates in businesses.
Right.
So if you're talking about a business, you talk about a sustainable business that's going to be about for some time, that's going to allow you to have a livelihood, going to earn some money.
Yeah.
And so what you want to do is do all the research, all the analysis, find out if what you're proposing is actually likely to do that.
Yeah.
South Africa's 80% failure in 1 year. The UK's something like 30% in the first year, 50% in the first 3 years. Having a good business is not easy to bring about. And so when you talk about getting numbers right, it's really about, are you going to be about for some time, and are you able to provide for yourself as well as provide for your customers?
Yeah.
And so I totally support.
Would you know, Ken, what the other stats are in Africa, business failure rates?
I know in Zambia, 70% is about that. Others range. I don't know Nigeria.
Would it be safe to say though that they are higher than UK rates?
I would say that more. I would say all of them are higher than
Right,
UK rates.
right. Now, and this is what I was alluding to when I was talking about being sensitive to culture. What is the reason why? Have you ever looked into that, Ken?
Yeah, there are three key reasons, and one is a great one. That you talk about cultural differences. Planning is something that I found as I've undertaken some research, that the mindset of Western Europe relative to planning and the mindset of Africans in general is quite different. And it comes down to the amount of time that you're looking forward. The other thing is there's two areas, one of which impacts on what you're talking about, and that is lack of education. In Africa, relatively few people, a relatively small percentage compared to, say, to the UK, go on beyond primary school or into tertiary education. So lack of education at the school level and lack of business skills, and those are the two, whatever country you look at, the research comes out, lack of education, lack of business skills and lack of finance is the reasons.
That's
So,
the opportunity out there, isn't it?
So like I was saying then, right, and what Ken is confirming is the culture is very, very important to understand one psyche. Where am I coming out of? Where are our people coming out of? All right. Now, an example, for example, with colonialism, okay? Colonialism left us in Africa with a 9 to 5 working timetable. Now, when you consider our environment in Africa, is 9 to 5 really the optimal time to work in Africa? I don't think so.
No.
Because one, it starts getting hot by about, I don't know, 11 o'clock, it's blazing hot. Then at about 12:30 you go for lunch. Maybe an hour and a half, 2 hour lunch break or whatever it is. And guess what you're going to eat for lunch? Heavy carbs.
Things that I have a lot of energy.
Right. Because also, it's in our culture to commune, to talk, to eat together. So at lunchtime, you're going to the communal spaces, the restaurants, to talk, to catch up, etc. It's part of our culture. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. That's who we are. But the problem is we haven't been taught to embrace it and optimize our business to be in line with our culture. So we have taken on a Western way of running our countries, our societies, our businesses, our governments, and at best of time it's clashing with our culture. Right? So by the time you come from lunch at 2 p.m., your belly's full, the sky, it's hot, you're feeling sleepy. You're not going to do any work. So you can imagine out of an 8-hour day, how many of those hours are actually productive? So you have to question then, is even our working culture optimized to, our working environment, is it optimized to our culture and to be productive? Then they'll say, oh, Africa is unproductive. No, it's just a lot of time we've been, like Ken said, a lack of education even to our own culture. You look at the millennials now, how many of them, the millennials in Africa, how many of them are embracing African cultures? Very few. Because they're influenced by Western culture. Right? So this, are we clear on the numbers?
Yes, absolutely.
And I believe you've already gone through that phase. You know you have a business on your hands. Yours is not fantasy, we know. So the next stage, then I would say, becomes the next problem of why you're probably, if you don't tackle this, why you'll probably be in the same place next year, is now your psychology. And this is now where 80% of the game is won or lost. Right? So a lot of our programming then into our, this is supposed to be your mind, by the way, your conscious and your unconscious.
Yep,
Right?
absolutely spot on.
A lot of our programming then that we have, right, which has borne root and is bearing fruit, our programming is not geared for entrepreneurship and business ownership.
Absolutely.
Right? So your psychology then, at best of time, the thing that is stumping a lot of us in getting going and really pushing forward the idea is our psychology. Right? So what we have unconsciously, there's something called an unconscious success limit. Right? So each one of us has got an unconscious success limit. Even the successful ones, right? Because there are people who are millionaires, but they'll never be billionaires. Because their unconscious success limits only takes them up to tens of millions. Others, hundreds of millions. Right? Because each one of us, successful or not, we have what is called an unconscious success limit. So it's very easy to gauge what is my unconscious success limit. You gauge it by your results. Right? It's interesting that when you look at, observe next time you're in church at the people who give offering, you will note that the people who have to give always have to give. They always have something to give. Those who hardly give, they hardly ever have anything to give. Because that's where their psychology is. They can't go beyond that. Right? So, if you were to lose your job today, more than likely you will bounce back in a similar earning role in short time. Because that's where your success, you're not down here now. You're up here. But now, here you are, you've been working in a 9 to 5, you're trying to break out. But have you adjusted your psychology to the level that you're trying to go to? I believe it's called comfort zoning. But some people call it a comfort zone.
I mean, is it also right for us to say that this is not only just an African thing? This is something that.
Oh yeah, now this is everywhere.
In fact, Henry Ford, who set up the Ford Motor Company many years ago, said, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're absolutely right. And it comes down to the attitude you have.
Okay. So most of us, we can get all the business training and all of that, but the thing that we don't get enough training is how do I actually, Anita, how did you optimize your mind to get to where you are? Because there are people who are struggling to just own their first property. Do you see what I mean? So a lot of times you're asking Anita, how do I own property? How do I get into property? How do I buy another property? That's not what you need to be asking her. What you actually need to be asking her is finding out how she optimized her psychology. See, a lot of us are looking to start a business and obtain the financial benefits or whatever it is, but we're not asking about how do I deal with my unconscious successfully. Okay.
The question then is, how do we do that?
Yeah, that's why we need to tap into training. All this is a foundation for us to start preparing us into the training that we're going to be lining up to help us get over this, because what we found out is the reason why we're not speaking the same language is because we are not on the same platform. And there is no way we can work together if we are not on the same platform, no matter amount of this meeting every year. So we want this meeting to be productive. We just don't want it to be like any other meeting, but we need to be truthful.
Anyone else? How can we do it?
Was it
How did you do it? How can we change? The question is, how can I change
it?
that?
We move from just thinking about it to actually doing it, because obviously you've gone past that threshold.
How
now.
do I
You
adjust
actually
my
get it.
psychological?
How did
Way
you?
up,
Yeah.
way
So
past
how did you manage
I
to get
think-
there?
Mine was circumstances.
Right.
Uh,
So it was a push.
so it was a push,
Okay.
more than a push.
Okay.
I spent 5 weeks in intensive care in a coma,
Right.
and when I woke up from the coma, and I was told I'll never walk or speak again and I had a tracheotomy. When I got better from all that, I was determined, well, what else could hold me? What else is going to stop me then?
Yeah. That's
So,
what it is.
That's where I am now.
Mm.
But before that, when I started property, I had a very prestigious job in the Home Office, in charge of race relations for the whole country. Then my kidneys failed.
Push that environment, is it?
Yeah. Well, I was the hostile one. Try. So then my kidneys failed, and I remember them calling me into the police headquarters 1 week before Christmas and saying, "You're only working 4 hours a week, and you still can't do that. We're going to have to let you go." Not only did they let me go, but they paid me less than a month's wage. And what then happened from that was not only did I become homeless with 4 kids, I literally had no money. Went from earning a lot of money and having a comfortable job, parking facilities, my own office, to being completely homeless with £74 a week on the dole. So for me, that was a turning point. And that's what brought me into property. Not because I wanted to do property, but because I found myself homeless. And then I had to claw my way up from that to gain a property for myself and that. And then once I was able to do that for myself, I realized I could do that for other people. And they didn't have to be homeless for me to do that. It's just about breaking down the barriers that's stopping them getting the property. Financial barrier, emotional barrier, whatever barriers there was. And I was also prepared to do what everybody else wouldn't do, which is like drive tenants to the council, fill the forms in for them, and get and sign the document to say I'll be paid directly, stuff like that. And I ended up with more than 500 tenants. I was doing cabin crew pilots and that. Because I was just at a point where nothing could, what else could go wrong? I mean, I was lucky when I became homeless because my neighbour, I'd lived in the same street for 12 years. And they were a very old English couple and they were relocating to Wales. They just bought a home there. And they were going to be sheep farmers. And she said, would you like our house? And I'm like, I kind of thought, how much is it? She said, it's about £1,000 a month, but we'll give it to you free